Good morning, Professor Garavan.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Very well. So what time do we start at, Doctor?
We'll be starting in another 2 minutes, maybe.
Oh, because it said 9:30, and I was lucky I checked because it's only 8:30 here in Ireland. So we must have got
okay.
Lucky I went and just looked at my mobile. Oh my God.
Right.
That would be a disaster, Doctor.
So would it be convenient for you to start?
Have you changed organization, Doctor?
Yes.
And congratulations, you're associate
professor
now.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Garavan. Thank you. Professor Garavan, we are already on YouTube. It's already live.
That's fine.
So we shall, if you permit, we shall start.
Well, when you want to start, we start.
Sure, great. So I hand over. Yes.
You got my presentation. I hope you like it, and we will go through it.
Absolutely. We'll be sharing your presentation. I will now hand over the session to Anupriya. Anupriya, please take the session.
Good morning.
Thank you, ma'am. One key to the successful leadership is the continuous personal changes. Personal changes is the reflection of our inner growth and empowerment. Well said by Robert Equine. A very good afternoon to all the respected dignitaries, faculty members, and my dear batchmates. Today, I, Anupriya of PGDM, on behalf of Lloyd Business Schools, welcome you all to the session on the reflecting leadership development in the current time. Lloyd Business School is more than a decade-old institution established in 2004. The lush green and the campus of the Lloyd is spread across 10 acres. The location is futuristic, modern township, Greater Noida of Delhi NCR. Lloyd Business Schools is the privately endowed co-educational modern-day frontline B schools approved by AICTE, Ministry of HRD, Government of India. The guiding philosophy of Lloyd Business School is to integrate the theoretical knowledge with practical application for creating highly skilled and employable management professionals. This session is conducted by the esteemed leadership professor, Dr. Thomas Garavan, sir, a professor of leadership practice, University College Cork, and a visiting professor, Schools of Business, National College of Ireland. Sir has an extensive teaching experience at undergraduate and postgraduate level, including teaching on a specialist and generalist program. Sir also has an extensive experience in the delivery of executive education's mini MBA program, corporate executives development programs, and international teaching assignment. His specialties are in human resource development, human resource management, strategic development, leadership, research methodologies, and organizational changes. He has a consulting experience on leadership development in developmental assessment centers, multi-source feedback process, strategic human resource development, instructional designs, organizational learning, employee attitude, and survey. Sir is also an associate editor of the Personal Reviews and International Journal of Repute. It's an immense pleasure to welcome you, sir. I would extend a very warm welcome to our respected director, sir, Dr. 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗏𝗃𝗧𝗧, sir. Sir is an MBA from PUMBA, University of Pune, and MS in the Psychotherapies and Counseling. He's completed his doctorate in the management discipline. He completed his MDPs from the IIM Ahmedabad of the Innovative for Excellence program for leadership in the management education. He is certified AIMA BizLab trainer. He has spent 23 years of his career into teaching, research, and training, and has worked with the organization like Birla Corporations Limited. During the last 15 years, he has undertaken various research projects, consultancies, and the training programs for the corporate world. His interest areas are marketing management and customer relationship management. Now I invite Director Sir to share his few words of wisdom with all of us.
Thank you, Anupriya, and good afternoon, everyone. To start with, I would like to put forward a few of my views on leadership. In fact, leadership can mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
However, the essence remains the same. It's more like water. It becomes what it is poured into. To quote famous writer Robin Sharma, leadership is not about a title or a designation. It is about impact, influence, and inspiration. Impact involves getting results. Influence is about spreading the passion you have for your work, and you have to inspire your teammates and people whom you deal with. Well, the traditional narrative is all about the leaders, but leadership really isn't about the leader. It's all about empowering other people as a result of leaders' presence, and about making sure that the impact of the leadership continues even during leaders' absence. In this context, it becomes important for leaders to show up their authentic selves, care for their people, and their willingness to admit their own shortcomings as leaders. That's how they earn other people's trust and become recognized as kind of leaders that what people want to follow. I strongly believe the session by Dr. Thomas Garavan is going to highlight many such dimensions of leadership. Thanks so much, Dr. Garavan, for being with us for this online session. And all of us are eagerly looking forward to hearing your insights on leadership. Over to Anupriya. Thank you.
I would now request Professor Thomas Garavan, sir, to kindly take over the session and enlighten us.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you all from Ireland. It is good morning here in Ireland. And can I say that I'm very pleased to be talking to you today. The reason I'm talking to you today is really because of the connection and the link that I have established with Dr. 𝗤𝗄𝗧, because we published an article together last year, and we intend to publish one in the future. And she's producing a new book, and she's asked me to write a chapter. So while we were doing the article, it took some time to do, but that's publishing world. We established a very good relationship. And this is the second time she has asked me to come and speak to colleagues, students, faculty, administrators, and others in India. And I am very delighted to do so and to be able to talk to you this morning. And I love this, the words that were just said by our previous esteemed speaker on leadership and what leadership is all about. And it's all about people getting your followers or influencing your followers to come with your vision, your views, and to lead in an authentic fashion. So when we were talking about what we should do today, Dr. 𝗤𝗄𝗧 asked me to think about leadership development in the new world, in the world that we now find ourselves in. And therefore, I came up with the title, Leadership Development in a VUCA World. Now, I want to say a few things about VUCA in a minute, but if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you. That's great. Wonderful. It would be lovely if you could go to the next slide. I just want to highlight, as was said by our introduction, I have widely published in the area of training and development, learning and development, leadership development, and I've published quite a lot of papers in international, really high-ranked journals. But learning and development and the development of people is core to what I do. It is my essence for the last 30 years. I'd say it's my authentic self. So therefore, I am so delighted to be able to talk about one piece of development, which is the development of leaders, because leaders are so vital in this world that we now find ourselves in. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So I'm going to say a little bit now about VUCA. And can I say to you, as I speak and talk, I would love to have questions. So if you have questions, channel them in. I think we have a moderator here. I will take some questions at the end of the session. However, I would love to have questions during the session if that's possible, and all of that. So why did I go with VUCA? Now, if I look through the literature on HR, on leadership, and on training, on learning, 10 years ago, I don't think I would have come across the word VUCA. But in the last 2 or 3 years, it has become extremely popular in the practitioner literature, and it's just beginning to come into the academic literature, and academics across the world are beginning to look at different dimensions of VUCA. and seeking to explain what these mean for organizations, how they lead, how they practice, how they structure themselves, and how they strategize to be successful in a VUCA world. So the first thing I've said on my slide there, I said VUCA, it's a framework for businesses, for the business environment, and it sums up the difficulty in creating, to create sustainable growth. So VUCA has its origins in the US Army, and it was a catch-all for it's crazy out there. It's difficult. Let's see what we can do. But now it has emerged as an important framework to capture 4 very important features of the external business environment. And they are volatility. How volatile is the environment? Is there major volatility in it? Is it up and down? Is it changing at a fast pace? All of that. Then we have uncertainty. Does the external environment create uncertainty? Are there activities and processes going on in the external environment that are difficult to read, difficult to understand, difficult to interpret for organizations? So that's the U part of it. The C part of it is complexity. How difficult is it to make interpretations of the factors within the external environment? In other words, do we, for example, can we get a read on what they are? Are they so difficult that it is almost impossible to tangibilize them? Or are they changing? Are they volatile, and are they changing at such a fast pace that it is difficult to even grasp them? And then the A is ambiguity. In other words, do we know what they mean? Do we know what all these factors mean? What do they mean for the organization? What prescriptions do they have? What action should organizations take? How should organizations respond to them? And how should individuals respond to them? So the VUCA idea is a very important idea. And I suppose it is driven by a large number of things, but I have highlighted on the next slide, which we'll go to now, where I've highlighted 5 things that I think are going on in the external environment that cause it to have a VUCA characteristics. So we move forward to the next slide. Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much. Wonderful. So the question is, what is causing VUCA? Well, I have delineated 5 factors here. I should tell you straight up that there may be more. I didn't include pandemics, but they're obvious. And we've had one massive one. We didn't anticipate it, and it brought a sense of uncertainty. And in fact, COVID-19 was a classic example of VUCA in operation, because it created great volatility, created great uncertainty. There was great complexity and ambiguity, because we did not know how the virus was rolling out, what shape it was taking. And in fact, the interesting thing is that over time, the pandemic changed its character. There were different variants of it. So it was a classic example of the VUCA framework in operation. But I've highlighted 5 more other factors, and of course, we hope that we don't have more pandemics, but the reality is we will. So the very first one is digitization and technological advancements. Now, this is the real primary driver of VUCA, and it's bringing about a major acceleration of change. So we have lots of different concepts. We have artificial intelligence, which is beginning to be researched within the field of management, HR, training and development, and leadership development. We have machine learning, which is very important. It's influencing the way in which we deliver services to our customers, all of that. Then we have augmented and virtual reality, and those have been incorporated into HR processes, into training and learning processes, and I suspect into leadership development processes. So that's the first one. The second one we have globalization and deglobalization. And here we have 2 forces operating against each other, because globalization has and will continue to cause major disruption. And this, of course, the pervasive role of the MNC in this context, which has a global presence. And recent changes does suggest that countries and organizations are want to deglobalize, to become more local, to have more local solutions, etc. The third factor that we talk about here is cross-cultural complexity and diversity. Now, this is 10, 15 years ago, I would say, when we were doing research on learning, training, development, leadership, we didn't pay much attention to cross-cultural issues. Now they are de rigueur. They are essential to understanding how leadership processes, management processes, training, learning processes, development processes differ in a cross-cultural context, and the role of cross-cultural variables like Hofstede's and Globe and their particular dimensions. What do they mean for organizations? What do they mean for the way we practice things? How do we implement policies? How do we formulate practices, etc.? And of course, the great thing that all of this has brought to the fore is the whole acknowledgement of diversity, inclusion, and differences. That's a very important issue. Differences in how we do things, it's acknowledged. One size does not fit all. We now have a world where we need different variations, and this is increasingly, I suppose, something that maybe underpin deglobalization efforts as well. The fourth factor that I have highlighted here is big data and analytics, all the rage. Organizations, management scholars are beginning to engage with big data. What role does big data have in producing novel business solutions? How does it influence the process of managing? How does it influence how we solve problems? How do we move away from what might be traditionally an intuitive approach to one that produces, that we derive solutions based upon the best evidence? That's very important. Then we have the fifth factor that I've highlighted is generation differences in changing work practices. Now, Gen Z, that's a big phenomenon in India. It's actually beginning to catch on worldwide, but a lot of the research that has come out in Gen Z has focused on India and about this, the latest technologically savvy generation joining the workforce who have very interesting technological sophistication, unlike all of us, who have very significant needs for development. They value development. They prioritize it as important, and they have particular preferences and approaches around the development process. So they are a very interesting group, and they are going to be, I have to say, the source of great research in the future as to what are the talent needs and the talent development processes all around these differences in generations. And of course, we increasingly are acknowledging that we need all generations. So we must look across the generations because they all have differences, but they all have something very important to contribute. So those I picked out here. What is causing VUCA? I have mandated or specified 5 factors. There could be more, but this is just a good grouping of them to show. And I think the conclusion that we can draw from these 5 factors is that they're complex and they're all very difficult to read and they change at a great rate. And what they do is that they bring great complexity into how organizations are managed. And of course, in the context of what we're talking about here, how leadership development is undertaken in organizations. So if we could move to the next slide, thank you so much. We will talk. So now I have talked about the big macro context. Now we're coming down to the process of leading, and we're going to focus a little bit on what do leaders need, what a leader needs in the context of a VUCA world. And I think it's fair to say that if you read what I call the Gray Practitioner Management Report Consultancy literature, and if you read the literature from the academic world, which is growing, but there's a smaller volume of it, I think we know that VUCA is here to stay, The world is going to get more complex, and we've had some good examples of it this week in a global context, in the context of Russia and its activities in Ukraine and all of that. That has brought already to Europe in particular very considerable complexity, ambiguity, uncertainty, and volatility. And I think VUCA is here with us to stay. So in order to then, what a leader needs, I started to look at some of the attributes and the behaviors that we expect of a leader to be effective in an operation and effective in influencing people, because I define leadership here as the act of influencing others to follow a mission or goal and achieve important outcomes. And as our esteemed previous speaker said, leadership is a person thing. We often think about it as a physical, objective thing, but it is really all about the people. So the very first thing I have here is that from the modest enough literature that we have currently, the first thing that comes up is that a clear mission is very important. A clear mission helps the leader to navigate complexity and make good decisions in a fast-changing world. Mission is a major motivational tool that leaders can use during uncertain times to motivate your followers, motivate people, motivate employees at all levels within the organization, and bring them along with the mission and vision. And of course, when I talk about mission, I really include vision in an overarching way, as well as very specific missions that I think organizations can have. And the funny thing we know from research is that many leaders are not very good at actually articulating a compelling mission, a mission that motivates, influences. Because if you think, for example, of transformational leadership, two of its key components are the articulation of an inspiring mission, an inspiring vision, and motivating followers to follow it. And of course, if you also look at another concept, which I think is a popular concept in Indian literature, management literature, is the notion of spiritual leadership, which is beginning to become quite popular in the literature now. And spiritual leadership envisages issues like articulating a compelling vision, inspiring through hope and faith, and also altruistic love. So that brings to the core the center of the person and attending to their spiritual values when they articulate this mission. So the mission is really important, and it is often, I would suggest, a significantly underappreciated component of the leadership process. Then a consistent message is the second thing. Well, during times of volatility, during times of crisis, during times of disruption, consistent communications is important. The reality is that as employees and as a human being, we like clarity. Clarity helps us to act, to pursue the vision, to pursue the mission, and to stay focused. And clarity in communication facilitates action and a sense of purpose. And those are very important things. And again, we sometimes forget about the messaging, how we message, how we communicate. Now, the third point is saying, anticipate but do not plan. Don't plan to get yourself out of, planning should be in flux. It's a roadmap. It will change. Plans are not meant to be stuck to rigidly, but plans are useful. They help you to navigate change, to navigate uncertainty, but they are not rigid. They need to be adjusted, to be modified, and to be changed if need be as we go. So anticipation, but don't plan yourself that you're going to move out of it. Now, look to the past. Don't totally abandon the past. However, don't be a slave to it. Good ideas can be adopted. You may have past successes. They can be very instructive. Mind you, you can have past failures. They can also be instructive. So think about things you've succeeded with as a leader. Think about things you have failed with as a leader. What comes out of them? What are the key messages? What do we understand from them? Then we have the notion of embracing complexity. So complexity is inevitable. Let's take that as a given. It cannot and will not be avoided. So develop the skills and mindset to cope with it. So I suggest to you that, first of all, embracing complexity is as much a mindset as it is a skill set. If cognitively you don't understand change, you can't embrace it, you cannot deal with it, then it's going to be difficult for you to acquire the skills to navigate it. So this is something that I find in my consultancy experience with leaders, and in my executive education and executive development experience, is that some leaders fear change. They fear complexity. They cannot deal with ambiguity. They cannot deal with big picture. They become too focused on the detail. They become too focused on the micro, and they lose sight of the bigger picture. Thank you so much. We will now move to the next slide. Thank you. Now, we're still on here. Now, I emphasize networking. Become your own network. Build it. Build connections. Have networks outside your industry. Use networks to solve problems. Have weak ties as well as strong ties. Now, I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Strong ties are very close relationships that you have. They are great for moral support. They're great for emotional support. But strong ties aren't necessarily very good for important pieces of knowledge and information. I wrote a paper with a colleague of mine, which was published in HRM, Human Resource Management, which is a very 4-star top rank American journal, where I looked at learning and development specialists and their use of weak ties and the use of strong ties. And we found that strong ties were great for mentoring and social support, but weak ties were great for information. So weak ties are people that you don't know very well, but you do know. And you can get up the phone, send them an email, and they'll come back to you perhaps with a piece of information. But a very good leader has a network of weak ties and strong ties. He has a mix, or she has a mix. They have a blend. They don't rely all on strong ties. Strong ties are useful, but they're done in the modern world. We need a lot of weak ties as well. And there need to be weak ties outside the industry, outside the profession in which you operate, outside your specialism. Now, allow your people freedom. This speaks to something that our esteemed earlier speaker mentioned, which I was very impressed to hear. Give employees flexibility. Empower them. Allow them to be creative. Do not emasculate them. By emasculate, I mean tie them in, put restrictions on them, impose rules and processes and procedures that prevent them to act in pursuit of organizational goals. This is something very important. You find, I go into some organizations and I see they have all the employees have become compliant. They just do what has to be done. The culture, the environment, the leadership aura, the leadership process doesn't allow them to work on their own, to take decisions, and to be creative. That's an amazing thing that many organizations and leaders make mistakes on. I continually experience it as I go through my consultancy world. And I'm amazed that leaders don't say, right, what's going on here? Let's give our employees their heads. Let's give them their hearts. Let them do what they need to do. And this is so important. You will never be certain again. So therefore, change will be the mantra. And as a leader, you will continually articulate change. In a VUCA world, coping with uncertainty will be a major challenge, but it's essential. So change, you'll never have certainty in anything. You must always be what I call operating in flux, in a state of flux. in a state of suspension where you must really know how to navigate that flux state and really be successful. Now, develop organization agility. Focus on the development of your organization to be agile, to shift and utilize resources differently to cope with change. I call agility a dynamic capability. And a dynamic capability, I recently wrote about it in a paper in the British Journal of Management, and how dynamic capabilities are so important for innovation, are so important for radical innovation, for incremental innovation, and for bringing about fundamental change in response to the complex external environment. And we specifically looked, my co-authors, at knowledge-intensive firms, and knowledge-intensive firms operate in sectors that are exposed to all the elements of VUCA, and in being exposed to all the elements of VUCA, they have to be able to change their resources well, quickly, reconfigure their resources, put them into a different shape to respond to opportunities and to threats. So if you want to have that paper, I shall send it to Dr. Perminia afterwards, and it's just come out a few weeks ago, and you can read it. It's a very interesting one because it's really talking about all of this VUCA stuff we have. Then develop personal agility. So the leader has two responsibilities here. One, to develop their organization agility, but second, to develop their personal agility. And I identify 4 dimensions of this. Self-leadership agility. In other words, that they have really good self-leadership skills and they can utilize them in different ways and shift them around as need be. Then creative agility, that they're creative, that they can come up with novel solutions, on-the-spot solutions to major problems. They have context-setting agility. In other words, they can read the context, they can set a new context, they can shift focus, and they can articulate a new mission very quickly. And then stakeholder agility, very important. They can work with multiple stakeholders. They can work with their employees. They can work with their top team. They can work with their board. They can work with government agencies. They can work with external stakeholders like customers and suppliers. Stakeholder agility is very important. So that demands of them a very significant, it demands of them a very, very significant set of skills that are important to develop. Okay, I think somebody, yes, thank you. Someone said put your questions in the box. Thank you so much for doing that. I shall answer the questions afterwards, and we are doing very well. So now, could we move please to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this. Now we're going to look at how you develop personal agility. And I've gone through some of the literature on personal agility in preparation for this presentation. And I have picked out a number of important factors that I think are so vital to your personal agility. And I suspect that agility and personal agility is the #1 developmental priority in a VUCA context. So the very first thing, and thank you, previous speaker, for highlighting this, is authentic leadership. In other words, be legitimate, have honest relationships, have strong ethical positive foundation, be positive, know your unique characteristics and build your leadership on them. In other words, this is asking you, know who you are. When I do executive ed, one of the very first things I do with all my leaders is I complete a personality profile of 16 PF5 or another really well-established profile. And I sit down with each of the leaders on my exec ed individually. I go through their personality profile and we discuss what it's telling us. And I ask them to give me examples of what came up on their profile. And then I ask them to talk about, well, how do you integrate that into the way you lead? So authenticity is the #1 root piece. Then the next piece, I think, is leadership presence. And this is also very important. It's very important to have gravitas, to act with purpose, to communicate with presence and project a positive image. A lot of leaders forget about this, and they just don't have good presence. So presence includes the tone of your communication, your body language, your facial expressions, your attire when you meet people and when you meet the public, and also the confidence and aura that you project. Those are not easy things to develop, but they're important. And frankly, not every leader has that presence or gravitas. Leader emotional intelligence. This is very important. And this is something that I did a paper with Dr. 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗹𝗲𝗰𝗁 on in relation to work-life balance, etc. And it's a very interesting concept. Emotional intelligence, I think, is key. And the pieces of emotional intelligence that I emphasize as I talk to managers are self-awareness, know yourself. That goes back to the authentic leadership piece. Be socially aware, be motivated, show empathy, and have strong social skills. The higher your emotional intelligence, the more effective you'll be as a leader. I think that's well established now. I think that's one of the most significant findings that we can glean from a lot of the literature, is that emotional intelligence is de rigueur, it's central, and it's the essence of what makes good leaders. And in fact, there's a lot of research which shows that it's the key way of differentiating between an ineffective and an effective leader. And I call it a very important boundary condition. And by a boundary condition, I mean, in science terms and research terms, it determines when and how, to the extent to which leadership is demonstrated. And of course, if you look at conceptualizations of leadership, including servant leadership, spiritual leadership, and transformation leadership, they imply and suggest a very significant component of emotional intelligence to be able to demonstrate the characteristics that those leadership types propose. On we go to the fourth one here, and that is entrepreneurial mindset. And this is the entrepreneurial. Focus on the right things, be open to new possibilities, show an aversion to bureaucracy, focus on fundamentals, take risks, and take responsibility for all of the business, irrespective of where you are located within it. Think of the wider business and think of what it's about. Entrepreneurial mindset, frankly, many organizations, in particular bureaucracies, dull it, diminish it, and don't allow it to flourish. Right then, I'd love us to go to the next slide, please. We're doing a very good job here. Thank you so much. Now, I have, how do we develop organizational agility? And I have highlighted 4 things based on my reading of the literature. First of all, as ambidexterity and dynamic capabilities. Now, the potential of the organization to be ambidextrous in the context of the change in and dynamic in the changing world. Now, ambidextrous means that the organization has great potential for change, but also great potential for stability. So it can balance the stable and the change pieces very well, and it can meld them, mold them together to navigate VUCA. Then dynamic capabilities. Now, dynamic capabilities are intangible things, but very important capabilities. So the classic examples of dynamic capabilities are the ability to sense what's going on in the external environment. What is it telling us? Reading it. The ability to seize. In other words, now we know we've made an interpretation. We have made an interpretation of the external environment. What do we do to capitalize on it? How do we integrate that into our organization? What new strategy do we need? What new structural configuration do we need? What new team process do we need? What new individual behavior do we need? And then the third dynamic capability that I frequently talk about is reconfiguration. How do we reconfigure the organization to allow us to capitalize on what's going on? So reconfiguring may be to design the organization in a different way, to move it to a different location, all of those type of things. So dynamic capabilities are the essence of a VUCA response. Now, somebody put up a very interesting question here, and I'll go into answers. Thank you very much. How spiritual leadership is relevant in a VUCA world? Well, I think the essences of spiritual leadership are visioning. The second piece that isn't emphasized in a lot of other leadership types is faith and hope. They are very important things. People need those, and if people believe that this faith, that the leader has faith in what they're doing, what the organization is about, how it's responding to major change, and that the leader has hope in that it can be successful, then that will help leaders and followers and employees to be very successful. And then, of course, we have the third bit of spiritual leadership, which I think is really interesting, which is altruistic love. And that that the leader performs his or her task in a caring way that demonstrates love and affection, but also concern for the needs of employees. That's vital. Thank you for that question, for whoever put that up. That is a very good question. I'm very impressed. Thank you so much. How do you build? Someone else has put up a very interesting question. How do you build self-leadership? The only way you build self-leadership is by experience, by knowing yourself, by working on your areas that you know are not as strong as they should be, and by gaining new experiences in different areas, pushing yourself out there in organizations, offering yourself for projects, for doing things where you can test your characteristics, and then you develop a greater insight. And of course, the other way in which organizations use to help organizations develop, leaders develop self-leadership. And these are two great questions. Well, congratulations. Are through multi-source feedback, through intensive feedback processes, who in terms of soliciting feedback from others, asking people to be critical, but positive, constructive feedback is essential to all of that. Two great questions. Thank you very much. Now, a future fit organization structure. Now, your structure must be agile. It cannot stay the same. In a VUCA world, we need a dynamic capability to reconfigure and to change things, and to change things quickly, not to take ages to do it, but to change it quickly. And it's interesting, during the pandemic and government responses to the pandemic across the world, I was observing that some governments, some countries had a better reconfiguration ability. They were able to change course quickly, to do things differently, to make it happen. The third piece of organization agility that I have highlighted here is the front line. Leadership is about leading all employees, but funny enough, the front line are so vital in an organization. They have recently begun to achieve a greater prominence in the literature. Frontline employees are at the coalface. They add value, the best value to the business, I tell you. They interact with the customer. They interact with potential customers. They interact with suppliers. They interact with regulators, with stakeholders, government stakeholders, with other types of business stakeholders. They are so vital. They are often forgotten. But a good organization agility and a really strong leader understands the front line, and that the front line will make things happen. The next one is a sense of insurgency. This is the idea. You must always, as an organization and as a leader, say, yes, we can always do things better. We did it well, but we can do it better. Continuous improvements. Think about it, things can be done. In other words, have that mindset in you, right? Okay, we did it this way, but you know what? We can do it better the next way, in a different way. So that sense of insurgency, where you question and where you say, right, could we do this differently? That will get you places. Now, on we go to the next slide, and we're doing very well here, and I'm very conscious of time. And Perminia, how much more time have I left, Doctor? Oh, she's there. She'll come back to me in a minute. Now what I've set out here, right, I've got another great question. Yes, ethical leadership is, of course, thank you. That's a great question. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Is ethical leadership, in fact, I didn't mention that. It is. I think ethical leadership is very important. You must do things in an honest way, in an with ethics, with integrity. You must communicate values around ethics, and you must show that ethical values are your North Star, your guiding light, your framework. So I think ethical leadership, and you know what, ethical leadership, spiritual leadership, and servant leadership are all very common in many ways, in that they put the person central to the process, and they actually talk about doing things in a way that's right and good. And ethical leadership is very important for sustainability and for the positive and continued growth of the organization. Now, here I have articulated a blueprint, a leadership development blueprint in the VUCA context. And I've highlighted a number of things that I think are important for individual leaders and for the organizations in which they operate. The first one is the value of mentoring. And mentoring is key to leader and leadership development. Note, I emphasize here leader and leadership development. I define leader development as the development of the self, the person, self-leadership. I define leadership development as development of the social, the relationships with your team, with your employees, with your direct reports, with your top team, with external groups. So both of those are essential to be an effective leader. You must develop yourself as a leader, and you must develop your leadership capabilities. Mentors challenge complacency. They inject new ideas. They definitely open up networks. They facilitate communication. And they help the leader to create a distinct identity. And that's very important. Right. Someone asked me, what are the most important, it's a great question, I'm going to call it out. What are the most important attributes to improve leadership in today's generation? I suggest in college, in university, our role as a leader, as an educator, is to develop their sense of identity as a leader, to develop their values and beliefs as leaders, and to ensure that they develop an ethical and socially responsible mindset. And I think one of the big things we can do in education is get all that mindset right. Then we go out into the world of work, and then the leader can start to develop some of the skill sets. But if the mindset hasn't been sorted in education, then the skill set is going to be more difficult to acquire. That's a very important piece. Now, create a learning culture, so important. Leadership development takes place in the context of a strong learning culture. And a learning culture, that should be, there's a little typo in the thing, it should facilitate examination, I meant there, not extermination. I don't know what, we will correct that. In other words, examination, self-examination, experimentation, doing things differently. Risk-taking for development, openness to new ideas, and encourages feedback. And if you have a strong learning culture, people will give you feedback, will give you constructive feedback. And that goes nicely to my next question, and that is create a feedback-rich culture. Feedback is essential. Constructive conversations that speak to strengths and development areas. Have feedback around potential and growth. In other words, ask people to tell you and to talk to you about your potential, because not everybody is potential to be the top manager, but they may make a great middle-level leader. And what is your opportunities for growth within the organization? And then the really important thing is have multiple sources of feedback. Don't rely on the same person all the time. Have a constellation of feedback sources that is so vital to what you do. Highlight the value of transitions. This is so important in leadership development. As leaders go through the process, they transition from one role to another. They go into different transitions. Encourage them to do lateral moves. Encourage them to act up, to take on temporary roles so that they can learn the skills of leadership. Test leaders through experience and stretch assignments. Do not let leaders sink or swim. Support them. Encourage them. Be there for them. Plan the transition with care and provide development support. Next one. Next slide. Thank you. Oh, that's it. Oh, no, it isn't. Right, here we are. One slide to go. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you for the brilliant way in which all of this has been managed. Thank you so much. Now, I put in here some important key insights for leadership development. And these are important. The first one I call vision. Link leadership development to the evolving business agenda. In other words, embed it. Make sure it's in the right place. So have a vision around leadership development. Have a personal vision as well as an organizational vision. Have toolkits. Develop a suite of horizontally aligned leadership development processes. Don't rely on one thing. Don't rely on just courses. Have mentoring, have coaching, have development, have feedback processes, all of those. Have stretch assignments, have international project experiences. Use the whole plethora. Data. Gather objective perceptual data about the effectiveness of leadership development. In other words, know what works, know what doesn't work. Build up a knowledge base on it. Timing. Leadership development is a continuous and dynamic in a VUCA world. It isn't a one moment in time thing. It evolves. It continually changes. It differs. It is evolution. Embed. Embed leadership development in organization for HR process and context. In other words, leadership shouldn't be an add-on. It should development. It should be central to the whole process of what the organization does. Publicize, continually communicate the importance of leadership development. And then evidence-based leadership development. Design evidence-based leadership development processes. In other words, pick out what does the research say. Go as a leadership development specialist in organizations. Look at what the research says about what works best, what works in particular contexts, what will work in one culture and what will not work in the other. So those summarize some of my key insights around leadership development in the context of VUCA. So I think I'm okay on time. I hope so. And now we go to some questions. And thank you very, very much. And I greatly appreciate having made this opportunity to make this presentation today. Thank you so much. Right then.
Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation today. I, 𝗥𝗲𝗬𝗱𝗏 𝗟𝗲 on the behalf of entire management, faculty, and students of Lloyd Business School, would take this opportunity to thank Professor Garavan, sir. Sir, please accept our heartfelt thanks for such an amazing and informative session. It's our honor to attend the session with a renowned professor of your stature. Your knowledge and your experiences have enriched our learning. Some of the key learnings from the session are VUCA and its causes and how to develop organizational agility, etc. Thank you for taking your time out from your busy schedule. We look forward for more of such an engaging sessions with you in future. We would also like to thank our faculty, Dr. Purnima Medan ma'am, for providing and facilitating the session with Professor Garavan. We would also thank all the esteemed dignitaries who have joined the session with us on YouTube. We are concluding the session and thank you so much for everyone.
Thank you,
Professor Garavan. Thank you so much. I'm honored, and on behalf of entire management and staff and the faculty, I would like to thank you. You have been so generous in giving your consent and delivering such an informative session. It's an honor for us that you have been here and you gave your consent for the session.
What I will do now to you, Doctor, I will send you some of the recent papers that I published, and
sure.
So you can distribute them around to students. Some of them are on dynamic capabilities, others are on leadership development, etc. So we will do that. I will be delighted to do that because they are just readings. And can I also suggest that I spotted 2 little typographical errors on the presentation. I will correct them and I will send them to you over the weekend so that you can then distribute the up-to-date version to students. There are just 2 things on it. And can I answer? I got 2 questions, Doctor. Can I just respond to those 2 questions?
Absolutely, sir. You can.
Okay? And I'm thrilled with the questions I've got. Now, somebody asked me a question, how can you give feedback without people being feeling criticized? And that's a great question, whoever put that up, and demotivating them. And that's a skill. And that's a great question. Someone was thinking about that because you have to coach feedback. in a way that it isn't threatening, in a way that, you know, acknowledge good things that have been done, because if you acknowledge good things that have been done, then it will be easier for the person to say that they can develop. And always state when you're giving feedback that you believe in them, that you believe in the individual. You must believe in them in the direct report, otherwise then it will not work. Now, what are the barriers to leadership quality? Right, okay. I would suggest that there are three main barriers that I've come across. First of all, we know that organizations don't always promote and select the best leaders. Let's be frank about that, they don't. And I think it's important for organizations to improve their act, to improve their game, and to be better at selecting very good leaders. That's important. Number two, I would suggest that leaders themselves, when they come into positions, do not spend enough time on their own development, on their preparation for the leadership role. And when they come into the leadership role, they often continue as if they were individual contributors. I find this all of the time in my experience of doing executive ed. They still think like an individual contributor. They don't think like a leader. And the essence of leadership is working through others to achieve organizational goals. And then the third thing that I would say to leadership quality that I experience in my life is the leader cannot let go. They want to be in control of everything, and they don't realize that they need to empower their employees, their direct reports, and to do things differently. That's a great question. Thank you very much for that. And can I, Dr. Ppimini, you have some very good students and some faculty people here that have asked some really good questions, and I appreciate that. And thank you very, very much. So if there's one more question, I'll be delighted. Right now, I've got one more. How can they who are sensitive in nature can deal with subordinates who are difficult to cope with? Now, that's a very difficult thing. It's a very practical reality that we find in organizations. Well, I think the first stage of that is you have to develop trust. You must develop trust with your direct report. Trust is important. Then you have to get to know them. I find I've often had difficult students, and Dr. Ppimini will know I've often had PhD students that were difficult to deal with. But we worked on it over time. We got to know each other. It was all about trust. If they know that you have their best interests at heart, they will move and shift and do things that they may not want to do. So that's a great question, is reality scholars. Right, yeah. Now, someone has asked me, 30 years in HRD and HRM, yeah, it sounds a long time. How much change have we seen in those 30 years? Well, I've seen lots of change, some of it very good, some of it not so good, but the most of it very good. I'll first say, as an academic discipline, HRM is at a stage of advanced growth. HRM as a discipline is really flourishing. HRD is really coming along, and HRD, and that's my real area, has begun to achieve an international stage, and all the journals in the field are really well ranked. In terms of practice, I think HRD as a practice in organizations has improved greatly. Organizations are more inclined to resource it. And it is, what I would also say is that there's a recognition too that one size doesn't fit all anymore, that you need different approaches and different types of strategies depending on the cultural context. So, and I also think that the profession of training, learning and development in HRD specialists has really grown. And what's the really interesting thing that has happened in this area is the feminization of the profession. I would suggest to you that 80% of people who work in learning and development and human resource development are now female, which has very interesting implications for the status of the profession, how they're paid, etc. And it's interesting that while 80% of the profession is female, the reality is that the most senior positions are still often held by males, which is a thing we need to change. And that's something that I've observed. So they are some of my key learnings. Now I've got another question. What are my thoughts about leadership then and now? That's a very good question, whoever put that one. Leadership, I think 30 years ago, when we talked about leadership, we talked about transactional leadership. Get the task done, that was the dominant paradigm. Now what we have more enlightened leadership. People are thinking about team leadership, self-leadership, collective leadership processes. All of those things have come into view, and we can actually see them practiced in organizations where there's hitherto we wouldn't have seen them practiced. Thank you for that question. Any more? Somebody?
Yes, sir. So, ma'am, can I ask a question to sir?
you can.
Absolutely, absolutely, Ashish. Please go.
Delighted for you to ask questions.
So first of all, sir, very good afternoon from my side and from the student side also. And then, sir, I have a question that's related to generation actually. And in today's generation, actually, every person has a pool of knowledge. And then in an organization, if we are leadership skills, if we are facing kind of leader to how to coordinate with them as a good leader.
Say that again. Now, I didn't quite. What was the question?
Okay, sir. I am asking that in today's generation, everyone has a pool of knowledge, and in an organization,
they have a pool of expertise in some cases. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So the question.
So what I am asking that, so in an organization, how to deal with those people as a leader?
Well, they are knowledge workers, we call them. That's a very interesting group of employees. And I say most of the research on knowledge workers says that you empower them, you let them off, they do their thing, you trust them, and you create a culture and environment where they can flourish. Because knowledge workers do not like to be managed, do not like to be controlled, and do not like to be restricted. They like to be empowered. And in some cultures, I have to tell you, sir, that can be a more challenging thing than in others, because I know in Indian culture, hierarchy and such like is a very important thing. I also find it in Pakistani culture and in other cultures, whereas in Irish culture, which is very, very interesting, we have a more relaxed attitude to this, and we can allow people more scope to do things. But that's a great question, sir, on knowledge workers, because they are a vital resource in any organization.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Right then, we're close to the end. We are. Can you believe it? And can I say to you, I'm going to say it now that the session is ended. I actually thought that the session was starting at 9:30 Irish time, but lo and behold, I looked at my mobile at 8:25 and I saw a text from Dr. 𝗥𝗲𝗳𝗹𝗲𝗰𝗁 saying, we're waiting to have you on now. So some great thing in the big sky, Doctor, guided me to say I better look at this, and lo and behold, but I was ready because I got up early. But I was lucky, otherwise I would have come at 9:30, because obviously the times haven't changed, so it's 8:30 here. And what time is it in India at this moment?
Right now it's 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. in the afternoon.
3 p.m. So
yes,
it's 9:06 here. Thank you so much. Okay, that is great. And I really am honored to be presenting here today. So at the weekend, Doctor, I will send you some articles, and I will also send you just the up-to-date presentation, 1 or 2 changes on it. But I think it captures what we're talking about today.
Absolutely,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Garavan. We would love to host you at Lloyd Business School if you come to India.
Oh, and thank you for that invite. And I want to go to India. And where is Lloyd's Business School located?
It is in Greater Noida. It is the part of Delhi NCR only. So okay, it's a very beautiful campus we have here.
I will look forward to that opportunity, and I will definitely next year. I hope to plan to travel to India. So great. Thank you so much. I would love to go, and we will talk about that offline, perhaps, and with the college. And I'm open to having visiting roles and things like that. I'd love to be connected. I looked up your university, and I really liked what you were doing. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was lovely, hearing from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and have a nice and beautiful day.
Thank you, and same to you. Thank you. Thank you all the students for facilitating, and thank you all the dignitaries who have joined us live on YouTube. We are concluding the session. Thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Garavan.
I'm very impressed, and I'm very impressed with the number of participants. It's fantastic. Well done. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.